Welcome to the Renegade Report. I'm Jonathan.
And Ramon is present. And Jonathan, what is the name of our president? I forget. Is it Cedric or Cecilia?
Mr.
I can't remember.
Chocolate, I think.
'Cause he said a speech a few weeks back, and we haven't heard him since. And I must be honest, the country's been doing swimmingly well since we last heard from him. Oh no, wait, we're lurching from crisis to crisis, and I don't seem to see all the shocky Cyril anyway.
Yeah, well, as we descend into the NDR, what you really want to do is you want to stay out of sight so that you can't be blamed for anything, really. As we go down, Cyril's actually quite good at this. Remember, he hid in the corner while Zuma was letting the Guptas loot the country. He was there the whole time.
No, Jonathan, hold on. He wasn't doing nothing. He was plotting his move. He said, you know what, it must all go to shit first. Then I can come and be the savior. Assuming that is all true, when the fuck is he going to start saving? Because I don't see it.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm sorry, Peter Bruce, but who apparently I'm talking to tonight. He will not be saving us. Indeed, we are screwed, and he has no intention of fixing anything, and probably no real ability to do so either.
No. Well, as a good friend of ours, Captain Pele, always says, he's a failed businessman. You know, he's rich because he happened to be black at a certain period of time in history. He's richer than Mick Jagger, for fuck's sakes. Like, Mick Jagger's had 50 years of, like, creating art, and Cyril made more money in 20 years than Mick Jagger did in 50. And you like, what are the two contributions to the world between Mick Jagger and Cyril? It's not really neck and neck now, is it?
No, I mean, Cyril's far ahead of Mick. I mean, really. I mean, Cyril's just given us so much, Ramon, really. He's given us the ESCOM war room. I mean, that's priceless in itself. Really solved problems, giving us that. He's given us the new dawn. As a metaphorical thing, it's almost as good as the Rainbow Nation. And really, Cyril has delivered, Ramon. I don't know what you're on about.
Yeah, delivered fuck all as far as I'm aware. But interesting. So, okay, I mean, the cabinet has been approved and Parliament's come together since what, about a month, 6 weeks now? And let's see what has been promulgated in Parliament. Oh, I see. National health insurance. So I actually spoke to a friend of mine. He's a surgeon, and he was like, he thought, after Aaron Motsoaledi leaves, the NHI would just die out. I tried to explain to him what the NDR was, and he was like, yeah, I sort of get it. But the good thing about the NHI is that Discovery is wanting to manage it. So it will obviously be better than them not managing it. I try to make the point that corporations jumping on, the governmental bandwagon to implement correctly socialism is not the hill I want to die on if I was Discovery. But he was convinced, like, oh, well, it's a private company, so they'll do better. But no, it's just probably delaying the inevitable collapse anyway of a health system. Well, not that it is thriving by any means.
Yeah, and Discovery aren't going to manage it. Discovery are going to manage the administration and the call center. This has been kind of long spoken about and known. It's there's many people who deny that the contracts have already, in fact, been signed, which theoretically shouldn't be possible. But Discovery's looking at it and going, well, collapse of private health. They hold 3 million members in private healthcare, so they're going to trade 3 million members and an admin fee on those 3 million members for 55 million members and an admin fee on every single one of those 55 million. So, look, it's a good business move for them. They'll have nothing to do with the actual quality of healthcare, though. They will be the place you phone where you go, I've chopped my foot with an axe, and then they'll say, all right, do you have authorization to go to the following hospital? And then you will arrive at that hospital, and they will have nothing to do with whether you get proper care for your chopped up foot or whether your foot ends up becoming gangrenous and falling off.
So let's talk about the specifics about the NHI, because I think, as you pointed out a few times, it's probably the most dangerous or the most malevolent policy that could come around, other than possibly expropriation without compensation. But NHI, in a nutshell, have you looked at the legislation, and what does it actually want, like in a few sentences?
So I think the simplest way to put it is that when Aaron Motsoaledi became the health minister, he sat down with a number of his advisors, obviously keeping the NDR in mind. And he would have said something like, what do I need to fix healthcare? And they would have said something to him to the extent of probably somewhere between 300 to 500 new hospitals and about 5 to 10,000 new medical specialists. And he would have said, all right, how do I get that? And they would have said, well, there's a couple of ways. One of the ways is to invest in new infrastructure and or to let the free market go at it. So we've got many companies and private businesses who've wanted to run private medical schools for a long time. And the private health sector would explode if they deregulated it just a little bit. And they said, you can do that. Or what you can do is you can force the private healthcare who already have 200 or 300 hospitals across the country and already host about 5,000 medical specialists. You can force them all to become actually part of the state apparatus. And essentially that is what the white paper has proposed. Ultimately, what will happen if they force this through is that your private hospital, if you live near one, perhaps your private hospital down the road will just become essentially a public hospital. Private businesses forced to service the public at a rate the government deems, and the people at that private hospital, the doctors, the nurses, etc., forced to service those patients at a rate the government deems.
Right. So it's expropriation of the healthcare system.
Absolutely.
It's the ESCOM
it's
of
EWC
healthcare.
of health. Exactly right.
And but this time they'll do it right. I mean, the previous SOEs, there's like Zuma was a problem in Gupta's, but in this one, I mean, we can really trust them to run it properly.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is what will probably happen is they'll get it sort of, it's the typical ANC model, right? Round peg, square hole, or square peg, round hole. So they'll make it fit. What will happen is there'll be no business confidence in health and no one will want to invest. Mediclinic will take, for example, as one example, will probably take a lot of their funds and just go overseas because they can. So will someone like the Netcare Group who can move into the UK. They'll just sort of shell off what they can here. Those are two of the big ones. Life are more based in South Africa, so it'd be interesting to see what happens to them. But the reality is if your property is going to be stolen by the government, or you're going to have your profitability dictated by the government, why would you build new hospitals? Why would you invest? Why, as a doctor, would you stay in this country and continue servicing patients?
Well, I mean, for the greater good, Jonathan Witt. I mean, don't you understand anything? It's about
they're very
helping
lucky.
Poor black people who were oppressed by apartheid.
Sure, and they're very lucky that many doctors are sort of politically lefties, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Many want to, just help people and all that kind of stuff, and it is sort of noble and all that. But the reality is people need to feed their families, and as the system collapses further and further, even those who feel that they are doing good will leave. And this is seen in the state sector as an example already, where people who do want to do good and do want to help don't tolerate the environment that they're exposed to there.
Yeah, so we often accused of just pointing out the problems, which people still don't understand what the problems are, i.e. the NDR. But anyway, we have to propose solutions too now, because that's the you can't moan if you don't have solutions. I have a solution for you. You take the entire budget for the healthcare system, you fire all the administrators and the managers and the middle people, and you divide that by the number of people who go to public health anyway. And how's this? You give them like a debit card, and in that debit card will be like 20,000 rand per person per year. And then what you do, you deregulate the medical aids, so they can give a hospital plan out for like $500 a month. So you give poor people a debit card with 20 grand they can use on any health care facility they want. And the deregulation of the medical aids will make medical aid and hospital plans much more competitive, because now you got a base of 55 million people. So prices will normally, lower. So they'll have a card with 20 grand and they'll have a hospital plan for like $300-400 a month. Now, I'm not an expert, but that seems like a good solution to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's one solution. I mean, it's a voucher system you're talking to, and it's the same thing we should be doing with education. It's one potential solution. I get that sometimes for some people it's a leap too far. They can't do the maths, or they think that it would be too difficult to figure it out, or they don't want to give people free money, or they go, okay, well, what if your expenses are more? What if your expenses are less? So there's a whole bunch of questions that it raises, and obviously there are answers to these things, but even a simpler approach would be to just go and say, do the reverse of what government wants to do. So just say, okay, private healthcare has 300 hospitals in the country. Government has, argument's sake, 300 hospitals in the country. Sit down with the private providers of healthcare and anyone who wants to tender for this from the private sector, obviously in an above board process, so not friends of the ANC. Sit down with them and go, I tell you what, guys, let's take a hospital as an example, Baragwanath Hospital. Sit down with a hospital group and say, you guys, you will manage this hospital. The government will still own it, but we will not interfere at all. It's only our asset. You manage it on a daily basis and you sort it out. And then in equal part, you could turn around and, I agree with you, deregulate the medical aid industry somewhat and give everyone the universal health care, but do that through the private sector, through giving them access to medical aid and subsidizing their joining fee or their annual fee if they can't afford it, for those who can't, which is not a large number of people, actually.
Yeah, 'cause I think the cheapest hospital plan's like a few $100 a month, I think, right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, you could probably get a hospital plan somewhere in the region of about 600-700 Rand a month. Not a great hospital plan, but it'll cover the major stuff.
Yeah, but the people who can't afford it often, spend that on beer on a Saturday night. So, it's a question of priorities for some. But you know what? I think people should be free to die of alcoholism and not have medical aid because they spend all their money on alcohol. I mean, that's what freedom is. Freedom of choice is a very important thing. Not because people should be prevented from doing stuff, but because maybe they should die sooner and make South Africa a better place.
Well, unfortunately, that's not how it works. You get to drink your alcohol. This is the problem with not having personal responsibility in a society and enforcing it. Because what ends up happening is you say, all right, we're going to have freedom, but we're going to have the safety net. So you drink yourself stupid and you get liver cirrhosis, and you don't just die, as you put it. You spend many years often suffering with this sort of liver cirrhosis with multiple hospital admissions at a great expense. And multiple different illnesses until eventually, 10 years later, 3, 4, 5 million Rand down the line in terms of health expenditure, you do eventually die. That's why, for example, Discovery pushes a program like Vitality. Their actuaries have worked out that if they can get you to be healthier, it will cost their medical aid less. They've also worked out other little things that work into their business. But as a concept overall, yes, if you run more and eat less, you will probably be overall healthier and live longer and use less medical resources.
Right, it is quite a thing, Vitality. So that basically they reward you for doing the opposite of what you pay healthcare premiums for.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
genius. And
But
then
so
you get
does-
like a free coffee
Sure.
or something. And people buy into that shit. Well, so do I.
Yeah.
Look, fuck, I got a fucking Apple Watch from
Well,
Discovery.
but it's Pavlovian, right? I mean, now they started it off with Apple Watches, but actually now most people just do it for a coffee. So they've got people doing the most ridiculous things and structuring their entire lives around this program for a coffee for 30 Rand. Just buy a fucking coffee, you cheapskates.
Or send it to the Renegade report. We need all the help we can get,
So yeah, but look, I mean, they're not bad ideas. They're not bad programs. I would say that I prefer something like a Vitality type program to what government has done with the sugar tax, because the sugar tax is the same thing. Discovery is saying to you, look, you can choose to run or not run. If you don't run, you don't get the reward. Government's going, we're going to charge you for the sugar, and you're going to get nailed whether you buy it or not, really, because at the end of the day, we're going to screw the economy. There's a whole bunch of other products that you don't even know about that are going to screw you, or just costs of things will go up as a result of these taxes. So yeah, I mean, it's a better way to run it through, as is not surprising on this show, to run it through the private sector.
Right. And just be careful, your mic is hitting your
Apologies.
collar. I mean, let's just just quickly, there's a question here about why don't big businesses stand up to the ANC? It's a quite a multifaceted but simple answer. A, they don't understand the ideology of the ANC at all. And what the ANC does very, very well is that they sort of atomize industries and they attack one industry. Then when that one's done, or that one's under control, or that one's regulated, they move on to the next one. So they keep putting separate industries on the back foot all the time. On top of that, ANC uses BEE to capture boards of private companies. And most importantly, let us not forget, arguably, managers at these companies sort of maybe follow the hegemony of the ANC. They think BE is important. They think transformation is important. I mean, they put all their money overseas first, but then they say, it's important to, stay here and make money for the government to tax you. And so it's a variety of things, but I think most companies are regulated. I either got license agreements with the government, or the government regulates them a lot. So if they go against the will of the government could take away their license to do business, which is very nefarious. But as I said, it's multifaceted, and I think fundamentally they don't understand the NDR, and they don't understand the greater picture. So when they are attacked as mining or agriculture, they are literally by themselves until the government moves on to the next sector down the road.
Sorry, Ramon, I just had to get up for a second, but I agreed with most of what you said, 2/3 through that. I just to add that I think, you mentioned that they buy into the hegemony, but I also think that companies are made up of individuals, and individuals sort of just tend to go along with the system that exists and is in place. And so people aren't really thinking about this as broader ideas. And if you're the CEO of a large company and you do start thinking about these things, you're probably worried about how you go about challenging this. If you're the CEO of a large company and you really want to take on government, are your board going to keep you there? Are you going to tank your shares? Are you going to collapse your company, and are you going to have to fire a whole bunch of people? Are people going to lose their jobs? So those are the kinds of probable, if we're being steel manning the corporate sector, those are some of the things that might go through your mind. Also, what's happened over 2 decades now is BE was never at the level it is now. It started off small. It really did start off small. It started off as a suggestion. It was a constitutional suggestion of transformation, and over the years, those people who own businesses will know this. It's become more and more onerous in terms of the paperwork you have to fill out, in terms of the certificates you have to get, in terms of companies who 10 years ago might have been level 1 rated and are now can't get above level 3 because they keep moving the goalposts and changing the rules. Now there's a recent change where they've said, it's not working because only the rich black folk are getting sort of in on the action. So now you must give shares to your workers. So, and these goalposts keep moving. And I think if you had taken BE to the Constitutional Court 15 years ago, you might have had a case, you might have won. Maybe not. It's in the Constitution, so it would have been a debate, but you might have had a chance. There were certain individuals on the court back then where you feel they might have been liberal in the general sense of the word, or the original sense of the word. But I feel that you've ignored it for 15 years. You built it into your businesses, and now to take it on, almost impossible. But it's like a vice grip on the entire industry.
Well, I mean, Solidarity did take them to court because a colored prison warder didn't get a promotion, and they actually left the position open because there wasn't a suitable black candidate. And they went to court, and I can't remember the case. It's Barnard versus Department of Correctional Services. Now, I can't remember the exact quote, and it might be under correction here, but the court said you cannot have strict quotas. You can't have this post is just for 5 black men, 2 black women, and whatever, 3 white women. So you can't have strict quotas, but the spirit of BEE and transformation is vitally important, so that the society must be representative of the demography of the country. So if you have a board of directors 8 out of 10, 8 must be black, 1 must be white, like, and a half must be Indian, and a quarter must be colored, or something like that. But you can't have any strict quotas. So that judgment was like completely all over the place. But this was 2003, 2004. But the court agreed with the spirit of transformation through quotas, but you can't use strict quotas, but sort of we agree with quotas generally. It was a bit of a fuck up of a judgment. But even back then, 2004, the courts were already on the side of, transformania.
Yeah, and I think it's too far gone now. And look, I think something I don't know if we've discussed this on air before or not, but this idea of ultimately companies turning around and going, we are proudly not BE accredited. I mean, we've said it on Twitter, we are proudly not BE accredited. Not that we could ever be. I mean, I think we'd be level 4 or 5. But if we wanted to be. But I think that's what it might come down to. I do get the sense that the sort of Afrikaans community, to use that as a sort of global term, the people building their own universities and sort of building their own communities, they may be the first to go this way, because if you don't need to do business with the state, and you're happy to lose sort of big contracts over which you have no control, which you might never get anyway. See, this is the danger with these systems, right? If you're a sort of medium-sized business, and let's say you do construction, you're never getting, and you happen to be a white Afrikaans male, the chances of you getting government business are highly unlikely. The chances of you getting business from one of the big corporates also highly unlikely. So at some point you might go, you know what, screw you, I'm happy to be part of some sort of coalition that goes, we don't do this. And that may actually be attractive. If there are enough businesses that do that, people may actually go looking for other businesses that have completely rejected the system. And there are fines and things, as I understand, that are coming in. But it would be interesting to see what government would do if enough people and enough companies refused to comply.
The nefarious things about all these regulations is that they're actually not really enforced by the state as such. They're enforced by corporations. So the corporations buy into the idea, or they propose the idea. I think BE was a momentum proposal like in 1988, if I remember correctly. And so when these regulations get passed, it's good for the corporation because they, can hire consultants to make them compliant all the time, whereas a small guy in the East Rand somewhere can't. But they enforce it on their clients, their contractors, their suppliers, and all sorts of, and all the way down the value chain as well. If the corporates turn around and say, fuck you, we're not doing BE anymore, the whole edifice crumbles. The whole edifice crumbles. But unless you have like a sort of, radical corporate sector that is really, against the ANC hegemony, you're never going to get it. And personally, I don't think the corporates will ever fight the system at all, because they're essentially part of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's generally true, and I don't think it's a South African phenomenon either. You see this playing out worldwide, be it in Europe, be it with Brexit, be it in America, and picking sides. I mean, we just had the most ridiculous month of virtue signaling by pretty much every major brand in the world, who changed their logos to an LGBT logo. And even saw some organizations had special LGBT mascots, and it's
was one of them ISIS. I'm sure I saw ISIS gay pride.
Well, what is it, Gays for Palestine or whatever it is.
Oh, the smallest group in the whole of Palestine. I think there's 2 of them.
Well, they don't exist in Palestine; they exist in America. They're an American
and Israel.
Group. So
did you ever watch Bill Maher's Religulous? Like in 2000?
Yes, I did. Yeah,
like really funny, but Gays for Palestine, and it's like, you can't be gay in Palestine. It's like, yes, I know, but Israel's worse. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it's just the corporates are not the answer, and I think it's difficult. It's not to say to clamp down on them, but they do kind of over time write their own death warrants and then get replaced by something else and someone else. we are in just a small space of time here, and it's that old thing of like, today there's of the top 500 companies on the sort of Dow. There's like 50 left in the top 500, and the same will be true in another 50 years. We all think Google is too big to fall, and Facebook and etc., and they will be taken over. Something else will come along, and we will move on, and other people will rise to power, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. Don't make the global tech companies utilities, because when the Democrats come in, they're going to fuck them over completely. So, I mean, a question is asked here, but if for Solidarity and them, go on their own, wouldn't the state impose more regulations and things like that? Yes, but I know people at Solidarity very, very well, and they're good friends of mine. And basically, they're trying to create what's called anti-fragile things. So the more chaos is sown throughout the world, and the more shocks are in the system, the stronger those things Solidarity creates will be. So they're creating an anti-fragile movement. So personally, I think the more the ANC tries to attack them, the stronger they will get. In actual fact, they're using all sorts of methods to do it, quite publicly too. And there's a lot of brilliant minds there. So the ANC is very good at long-term strategy, but they understand tech, and Solidarity and them understand tech very well, especially blockchain, especially the internet and encryption and stuff like that. So I don't think the state will win in this case. Solidarity has been around since 1922. The ANC has been in power for 25 years. Lindy Effect says Solidarity will exist for far longer than the ANC being in power, personally.
Yeah, look. Also, the pressure is on Solidarity, and chances are, they've got more to fight for. ANC runs the country; they've got an overwhelming majority. I had to laugh the other day when there was a Guardian article that was published. I mean, almost if you say it's ridiculous, you almost shouldn't have to say it was a Guardian article, but saying that the nation has been rocked by the findings of the commission into state capture, and it's just hilarious because who's been rocked? Nobody cares. Nobody's gone to jail. Nobody's been arrested. The ANC won an overwhelming majority again, plus another 10% to a party that's even further left of them and wants to steal even more and has stolen before. So it's hilarious, the sort of misunderstanding of everything that's happening.
Yeah, so I mean the ANC now really, if you understand the NDR, so what you have with the ANC now, you don't have good guys and bad guys or reformers and looters or shit like that. What you have are honest communists versus like looters, really. So the looters will nationalize something because they can profit from it. The communists want to nationalize something because it's part of the NDR. And who has Cyril's back? The honest communists. So when ESCOM goes tits up, when was last year, the year before even, the board said we need to downsize. We need to cut 33,000 jobs. We overstaffed, we're not producing electricity. And they were about to do that. Who steps in? Pravin. Oh no, you have to give above inflation wage increases and you can't downsize at all. The board or the CEO resigned at the time. Same with SAA. I assume the same is happening across all SOEs. Pravin comes in and says, no, you can't actually laws of economics. You just have to, stick it out somehow, incur more debt. We'll just, put on the costs on the consumers. So right now, what you have a battle for is the NDR both agree. Some just want it a bit sooner than the other, and it depends on the topic. So the looters want self-nationalization today because they can loot today, whereas Cyril wants self-nationalization when the time is right. I don't know when the fuck that is, neither does he. But they both want the same fucking objective. That's what no one understands. They both want the same thing. It's just a question of the one has a better PR than the other.
Well, I think what's misunderstood is, good cop and bad cop are still on the same side, right? They're still interrogating you, but at the end of the day, they are working towards the same goal. And the ANC is brilliant at this because they hide the ball very well. They do this all the time, where they pretend like there's some sort of fight within the organization, or there's some sort of controversy, or there's major disagreement, or there's a factional thing going on. There's no factional issues really. Yeah, I'm sure there are some people who want power over other people and whatever, but what they're very good at is they never forget what the ultimate goal is. And many of these things are completely set up to just lead the media down a certain path, which of course they are more than happy to follow, like Hansel and Gretel, our media. Very, very naive children. They'll
like
happily follow that.
It's like Heat magazine, but for politicians. It's celebrity gossip. I read, like, well-informed commentary on Daily Maverick and other places, and it's just not well-informed at all. It's a fucking soap opera. It's like, oh, Cyril said this, and they said this, and he was spotted here, and I'm like, what is this fucking Heat magazine, circa 2001, looking at Brad Pitt and fucking that other woman he was shagging? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's also the issues they focus on. Focusing on these idiots are still focusing on the fact that these schmucks are driving around in blue light brigades with expensive X5s. It's like, guys, like the tip of the freaking iceberg. Like, okay, you've told us about this before. We all know, like, nothing's changed in years. Nobody really cares. And frankly, like, if that was the biggest issue with what they were doing, we would actually be perfectly fine. So the focus, and the ANC knows this. The ANC, and you can watch in the media. You can watch for when some small story comes out that seems like actually quite pertinent. And it's quite important. And then you watch in the next hours or the next day as some sort of nonsense story comes out and gets sort of pushed hard. And all the guys come out and they all start making statements against each other. Gwede will come out and he'll say one thing, and Vavi will come out and he'll say a different thing. And they're all sort of fighting all of a sudden. But it's not a fight. It's just controlling the narrative and spreading that out for a couple of days to get over whatever they don't want you to focus on.
Yeah, it goes back to the Penny Sparrow, Adam Katsavelos, and all those other guys, right? Just these stories come out, and it's
at this point, those are manna from heaven for the ANC. I mean, really, what happens there is
calling false flag.
What happens there is there's a WhatsApp group with all these oaks on, and they might send messages to each other going, "Did you fucking see what that stupid white idiot said on a beach?" And then they're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. This is amazing. Please just send that to News 24 quickly. Just get Adrian and Peter on this immediately. We need a couple of articles written. Just sort that out. And what can we do this week while they're focusing on Adam that they won't notice? Can we pass the NHI bill quickly while they're not watching? Can we refund SAA to the tune of 300 billion rand? What can we do this week that they won't notice while they're bitching about some stupid idiot on a beach?"
Yeah. No, I'm calling false flag. I think they're all plants, EFF plants.
The EFF,
I saw it on 4chan. It must be right?
Pumzile is the EFF plant for sure.
She's gone very quiet, actually. Come to think of it, maybe she's blocked me. That's why. I don't even know.
I think there has been. I
forgot she existed until you had to tell me she did. Has anyone else heard of it?
I haven't noticed her recently, but maybe she's maybe I don't know. Maybe she's been told that she needs to calm it down a bit, and maybe she actually has calmed it down a bit, or someone changed the password to her Twitter. That's the only way I can see that she actually chills out.
I think Musi is God was hacked or something. Maybe now it's Musi is my savior. Maybe that's a better password. I don't know. Maybe talking about the Western Cape. So Biki Tsele, other than wearing a bulletproof vest the wrong way around. I don't know if you saw that picture. He wears it the wrong way around. It's brilliant. And he sent army into the Cape Flats.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not one to, what's the word? Be hyperbolic, but that is fucking dangerous. Why don't you just declare martial law while you're at it? Because I saw the under sections of the Criminal Procedure Act. They can basically cordon off an area and arrest everyone without a warrant for 24 hours. And that is what they are using to implement this sort of stuff in Hanover Park and a few other places. But the problem comes in, the gangsters who are there are not there because they are the most vicious or the most violent or whatever the case may be. It's because they fucking pay the police off not to investigate. There's hundreds of cases that have been opened against these gangsters and have gone nowhere. And then you find out, oh, excuse me, Captain or Colonel Prinsloo comes out and, oh, he sold 2,500 weapons. Where are these weapons? Oh, they were held in storage from private gun owners who, handed them in during the amnesty period to hand in unlicensed fire weapons. Okay, so they handed him into the police station, and then they somehow found on the Cape Flats, and they killed thousands of people. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it does sound like there's a bit of a very good relationship between gangsters and policemen on the Cape Flats. And it seems like the solution for all that is to send the army in and basically cordon off and, I don't know, maybe shoot on sight. I don't know. Instead of like fixing police or prosecuting or taking away, amnesty from gangsters. No, we just send the army in because, there's no other solutions.
I think what's interesting here is, so I think it's a bad idea like you do, but I think what's interesting here is the public reaction and analyzing why that public reaction exists. And the public reaction is mostly that this is a good thing. And even someone like Helen Ziller has come out in some support, not complete. She has her reservations, but she has come out in some.
Well, I mean, let's be fair. Sorry to interrupt. She asked for this. She asked for this 2-3 years ago, even last year, I believe. So she's not like sort of praising it. She's like, she wanted this.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the reasoning is interesting. So I think the reasoning is because part of what you've said, which is that nobody trusts the police. The police are in on it very often, and so there's no trust for the police. So that then when you offer someone else a force of sorts to come in and they will sort it out, people go, well, the current lethal force we have to sort this out, or deterrent, isn't working, so maybe the other version will work. And that's the one thing. The other thing, as we've discussed on the show before, is that our police force has become castrated because they are very often terrified of being seen to be in the wrong when it comes to confrontation, to the point that we have a police service which now watches crime take place in front of them and ignores it. We saw this with taxi drivers firing weapons, which were probably unlicensed, but it's irrelevant, weapons into the air in front of police, and the police did nothing. They didn't arrest anyone. They didn't get them to stop. They didn't draw their weapons. There was no reaction from the cops. So I think the problem is we've got into a point where people are like, okay, my choices are a police service which does absolutely nothing for me, and to continue to live in fear of gangsters and all that entails, or the army, who I know may very well shoot my child by mistake, but may also be some sort of deterrent in the way that the police are kind of meant to be. Sure, in a completely different way and not in the right way and all of that, but the justification is interesting, and I just worry about that, because I think that we've spoken about how the army would be used, how the police might be used in terms of the NDR, and if people on the Cape Flats are justifying the use of the army, these are the people there. They're not worried. Some of them maybe, but overall there seems to be some support for this. They're not worried that the rules of engagement for a soldier are completely different for a policeman. They're not worried that this could end up with civilians being killed en masse. They're allowing this to happen because they believe it's a solution. And that is very, very worrying in terms of the attitudes and the psychology of the average member of the public.
Well, I think generally speaking, humans would prefer order to chaos, even if that order is martial law, even if that order is dictatorships or tyranny or something like that. But I think if you go to Libya today and you say, do you like Libya now or under Muammar Gaddafi? I assume lots of people say, yeah, under Gaddafi, man. Like, we sort of knew the rules. Don't fuck with him, and then he'll sort of not leave you alone, but you know what the rules are, and you could sort of live and trade and do other things. Now there are no fucking rules, so you have no idea what to do. You're sort of in a stasis, for the past, what has it been, 8 years now since he died. He died in 2011, I think. So yeah, and that's why they jumping ship to Europe in record numbers. But yeah, people would prefer order. And listen, I don't live in the gay flats. I mean, I don't know what it feels like to live in a literal war zone where 11 people die over 2 days. It's the same as living in the south of Chicago. Every weekend there's like 40, 50 people shot dead. So I mean, it's a difficult thing, but as a precedent, I think it's terrible. It's just, to me, it's like just training for a greater.
It's interesting you raise Chicago, because just something on that point, which is that, the US example is police are in communities, then something happens with the police and someone they confront. Sometimes it is a criminal, but obviously in the US it's been made often a racial issue. They confront them, and then there's something happens, and the reaction often is to then withdraw police from those areas, which actually obviously makes crime worse because there's no visible policing. And so, yeah, this is a tough spot, because as far as I understand, for example, in the Cape Flats, there are places where cops are too scared to go. Now, I don't know if this will mean that the military is also too scared to go there, because newsflash, the military doesn't have much more that the cops have. They've also got bulletproofs if they need them. They also have rifles if they need them. As far as their capabilities, they're not that much greater, and the police are allowed to have a lot of special weapons anyway to deal with different situations. So it's just interesting, but you do need more. You need more in those areas. You need more policing. You need more force to some extent, not exertion of force necessarily, but certainly the threat of it as some sort of control. It's a tough situation. I don't think Helen Ziller is ignorant, and I don't think she hasn't thought this through to some extent. I think it's an interesting conversation, and I know the knee jerk, certainly from our side, is to go, "Are you nuts? To send in the army? This is crazy." But I do think there really is an interesting conversation to be had with someone who's been thoughtful about this, about why it might be necessary, why it might be the sort of point we've reached.
Yeah, well, talking of Helen, I'm in contact. Hopefully, she'll be on the show sometime next month. I'm in contact with her, and we can talk about this and her plans for the future. I don't foresee her moving to Jeffreys Bay and lying on the beach till she pegs over.
Maybe she'll go to the Cape Flats. I've heard I've heard it's safe there now. Yeah. So, well, I'm sure she's gonna be busy. She's gonna be busy with whatever she ends up doing.
Yeah. So, have you heard of a term called prescribed assets, Jonathan Wood?
I've heard the term. You're gonna have to give me some context.
Okay, here's the context, right? So the government has basically leached off all the taxes they could possibly get from the private sector. So the tax rate is really high. They increase levies on fuel. The sugar tax is in. You got VAT is higher. All that shit. They know very well they are at the downward trend of the Laffer curve. If they impose more taxes, people just won't fucking pay. And it's simple as that. So now to get money from somewhere, they're just going to expropriate things. So the NHI is one area, prescribed assets rather is another area, and the IRR will be having a campaign on this very soon, and Mike Schussler will be in that campaign. They got great content about it. Basically, what they want to do is the pension fund that you have, the money that you've invested in your pension, they want to take some of that and force your pension fund to fund state-owned enterprises. Isn't that great? Jonathan, do you want to give money for Eskom?
No, well, not any more than I've already given, but I feel like this is not going to be a choice.
No, of course it's not a choice. What do you think this is? Democracy, please. No, so they're going to take the pension fund and the pension that you've saved for decades, perhaps, and they're going to force your pension fund to fund Eskom, Transnet, build new stadiums somewhere, Sanrail. It all hasn't worked out. Oh, we'll just take money from the pensioners and make them, invested in Sanrail. And a question someone asked to me was, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. They're not going out. They'll never touch the public what's it called, the PRC fund.
Mm.
And I said, well, what makes you think they'll go for public pensions, you idiot? Private pensions is first. Like, who's going to moan about that? The unions don't give a shit. And the pension funds are very quiet about this. And the people who have pensions or who are pensioners are like sort of not coalescing around this in any meaningful way. It's not policy yet. It's not like a bill or piece of legislation.
I think
but
there is actually,
it has been in the
if I'm not
manifesto.
mistaken, there's a white paper. There is something that's been put forward, and once again, it's nefarious. So what they'll do is they're not going to walk into your private pension fund, your average private pension fund, and go, okay, look, you've got however much money, and we're going to take it all now. Thanks. It's not going to be like a daylight robbery. What's going to happen is they're going to pass a law which says, for transformation reasons and because of inequities in wealth and because we have a horrible Gini coefficient and because of privilege and because of all these things, it's only reasonable that 2% of all privately invested pension funds should be invested back in projects that benefit poor people. And of course, those projects will be ESCOM, and those projects will be SANRAL, and so on and so forth, right?
And NHI.
And the NHI, and whatever else they want it to be. And then they'll take it from, and everyone will go, I'm not happy about this, but 2% out of 100% of my money, all right, it's not bad. I've got 100,000 invested. If they take 2,000 rand, it's not so bad. And how bad can SANRAL be? We need roads, right? And 2% will become 5, and 5 will become 10, and 10 will become 30, and so on and so forth until eventually there will be either very little left, or a significant portion of what you have invested will basically go back to the state in the form of a tax. Because let's be honest, tax theft, it's the same thing.
Expropriation of pension funds. The word expropriation comes up a lot, but no one seems to use it except for land for some reason. I mean, the NC are very good at propaganda. This is expropriation of your pension fund. NHI is expropriation of your healthcare and forcing your doctors into slavery to become a civil servant. EWC is obviously expropriation. Have you noticed, Jonathan, the president did not mention expropriation by compensation in his State of the Nation address. He called it spatial justice. Now, where have we heard that term before, Jonathan? It's quite a good term, don't you think? I'm sure I've heard it before somewhere.
What was it? One of the Human Rights Commissions or one of those nonsense?
No, it's fucking Patricia de Law. The whole platform of good.
Spatial justice.
I even put in a little hint there. The whole platform of good was spatial justice.
See, I didn't pay attention to Patricia de Law at all in the last elections, but
you call yourself an analyst? Come now.
Patricia de Law, there is no analysis. The country's greatest grifter. Nobody grifts better than Patricia de Law. So, that's my analysis on her, beginning and end.
More than Peter Bruce. I thought he was a great grifter. Peter Bruce, let's talk about him quickly. Vote for Cyril, give him a mandate. Election comes, the day after the election, he fucks off to the Western Cape to live under the DA government. Brilliant. Don't you think?
It's amazing.
Fantastic.
It's amazing. And as far as I understand, his kids are out of the country. And who knows, probably a lot of his money as well.
Well, if he has any, hopefully not. But I think it's and these people are not called out for their bullshit. It boggles my mind all the time. If we acted within 1% of these fuckers, we would be lambasted all the time.
Well, you see, it's double standards, because with them you must play the ball, not the man, right? But with us, it's play the man all the time. So they can go after you or I based on calling us names or insults or saying we're alt-right or whatever it is. That's perfectly fine. But with them, no. It doesn't really matter how they live their lives or how these decisions affect them. That should be separate from their positions and their analysis and their manipulation of the electorate.
I agree. Well, speaking of the alt-right, no, actually, let's park that a little bit. I've been reading a lot of alt-right literature, actually, and some of it is actually quite interesting. We will talk about that at a later stage.
Might be on your own there.
Oh, no, this is like 2008's neo-reactionary dark enlightenment, they call it stuff. It's not racialistic at all. It's like the concept of the state. And one of the main arguments are they're all anti-democratic. Because they say democracy itself is a vector of the left. it inevitably leads to the left anyway. So they're anti-democratic and they like
The
anarchist, monarchist,
progress
all sorts
theory.
of other things. They're anti-progressivist at the end of the day. And they even consider the Republicans, progressives. They're just driving at the speed limit, as Michael Malice said. But talking about grifters, Jacob Zuma, he had a platform today at the Zono Commission, and he said, well, basically that someone's been trying to kill him for 30 years. Now, I don't know. Either Jacob Zuma is like a super ninja assassin evader of sorts that, just can't be killed. He's like the Highlander. Or his assassins are fucking terrible, or it's all bullshit. I think maybe he's a super ninja assassin evader.
I was going with option C, but cool. Let's go with the ninja.
I mean, did you listen to him today or read about him?
I saw some stuff sort of mentioned about him, but I didn't pay too much attention to it. I'm very limited time for that man, and very limited time for the Zondo Commission, to be honest. I think it's all a farce.
Right. Well, I mean, too long didn't read version. He's not responsible for anything. Mm-hmm. There's been a conspiracy against him for 30 years.
Mm-hmm. I heard AMN7 was his idea.
Yeah, he's very proud of it.
I don't know how that's like admission of guilt right there. Like it's admission of guilt. Like lock the guy up. And he was under oath.
Just for bad taste, really. I mean, firstly, and most importantly, Thabo Mbeki actually is far better friends with the Guptas than Zuma is. Isn't that interesting?
That's his claim. Except it's I don't know. Perhaps we don't have the links investigated well enough, and maybe it is true, but it certainly seems like Zuma's family benefited far greater than it would seem or appear that Thabo Mbeki benefited.
Well, until Kulubuse ate basically everything. So maybe that's why Jacob is poor again and needs the government to fund his 11 Q5s or whatever he had. I don't live so far away from Parktown, and the traffic this morning was fucking ridiculous because that idiot was talking shit for 8 hours. I had to wait in traffic for the first time this year. I'm actually pissed off.
Finally, well, you thought Zuma must fall and it was over, but no, he's coming back to ruin your life even more.
He comes back and he still fucks up my day, even though he's no longer our president.
Listen, I saw someone likes my Dutch support, which it seemed only reasonable given that they almost won the Women's World Cup, and I wish they had, because then we wouldn't have to listen to that whiny bitch.
I thought you were expecting solidarity with Jan van Riebeeck, to be honest.
No. This is not solidarity with Jan, but good guy and all that. But no. Have you paid any attention to that sort of stuff going on in the US at all?
The US soccer team. I watched a few videos of these very uncouth women, yelling bitch at each other and saying that they deserve this and they won't speak to the president, but they'll speak to anyone who wants dialogue. So basically like a genetic clone of themselves. It's all very, boring. I don't watch sports anyway, so I don't watch men.
Yeah, and you missed a really good weekend, Ramon, I must say. You don't watch sport, but it was a weekend of sport and good sport, I might add.
Well, no, I mean, come on. It's people hitting the ball around for a whole day. And two countries I don't give a shit about, England and New Zealand, I think it was. Mm-hmm. No, I don't watch sports. And I'm going to stand by that. I'll fight you for it.
What do you think of this sort of there's this self-own happening where Jacob Rees-Mogg tweets about the Cricket World Cup and about England winning, and he gets like ratioed like badly, like 9,000 replies to like, I don't know, a couple of hundred retweets. And he basically the replies are, it's immigrants who won it for us basically, and you're anti-immigrant. What is it so difficult for people to understand the difference between a legal and an illegal immigrant? Why is this so hard?
Because you must read a book called The Virtue of Nationalism, which I just finished today. It is absolutely remarkable. I think I could be a nationalist, but not in South Africa. But his conception of liberalism is one of the rational pursuit of universal rights for everyone, and that basically liberalism seeks to have a world order that is based on individual human rights and all the rest of it, and that borders actually are detriments to the liberal world order. So if you look at the UN, you look at the sort of global governments that people want to form, the author of this book, who I forget his name, it's a Jewish Israeli name, I'm sorry, Hazom something.
Yaron Hazomi.
There you go, Hazomi, that's correct. And basically he's saying that, the liberal mindset, and it's all about like the classical liberal here, not the left liberal, is one where individual human rights, individual freedoms, individual things, it's basically atomizing people into individuals without taking into context culture, family traditions, history, religion, ethnic background, and things like that. And assuming people can sort of divorce themselves from their upbringing and the environment and be like free individuals. So if you have free individuals, enlightened, rational individuals, you don't need borders. You don't need countries. You just have like a world government to sort of protect rights, and then there you go. Which was a fascinating argument to me, and I think it's the correct one, where he says, culture, history, religion, all that makes communities strong, and to sort of try to divorce people from that is fool's play.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't think I disagree with too much of that. I haven't read his book. I did listen to a podcast with him. There were some small points I didn't fully agree with. I need to go back to it, but it still doesn't. I saw someone comment in the comment section. People can't be illegal. Yeah, that's the favorite left talking point. But yeah, it's just the most straw man sort of argument. I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg got ratioed, and I saw a lot of people making the point. The Australian, not the Australian, the British, the English team. They got a South African batsman and a West Indian bowler, and their captain is Irish, and so there's all of these sort of things coming out and going. You see, immigrants are great, and I've never heard anyone say that legal immigrants are bad. I mean, those people got into that country because probably of their skill. So that's the exact point. Like, they were vetted. Someone looked at them, said, yes, we want you because you add value to our society, and then said, please come in. This is actually a conversation we need to have Gwen on the show for, because Gwen is very pro open borders.
I actually saw it today. We're planning it.
Cool. So, Gwen has the is ought argument. What isn't necessarily what ought to be, and I think it'll be a good discussion. But yeah, it's completely baffling to me that people are so disingenuous, and some know what they're doing, so I get that. But others, it just seems so unreasonable.
Well, I must admit, you had the tweet of the day where you said people from all over the world come around to join ISIS, collectively combining different, histories and nationalities into one, what did you call it? Something to behead others. I can't remember. It was a great tweet, though.
Yeah, so I mean, it was in response to Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan had tweeted out that England's diverse World Cup winning cricket team is the opposite of Brexit. An Irish-born captain, a New Zealand-born hero, two proud British-born Muslims, players with West Indian, South African, and Pakistani backgrounds. And I said, this isn't the opposite of Brexit at all. Every single one of those individuals legally immigrated into the United Kingdom, something completely supported by leavers. You'll also notice that all of those people played for one country under one flag, proud nationalists the lot. And then I followed that up by saying that ISIS was a very diverse militant group with people from many different countries who came together to kill and rape with great success. If you really want to play the diversity is our strength game, trademark, without taking into account that which matters, you won't like how this ends. And that's the whole point about diversity. Diversity on its own means absolutely nothing. This is, when people talk about diversity of thought is what matters. Yes, I mean, diversity of thought, if you were to pick one diversity, then diversity of thought would be what mattered. But if you're going to just be, take a logical approach to it, there's lots of diversity which matters, which you might take into consideration. Certainly, if you're going to be considering, in this example, immigration, you take into consideration the diversity in how those people want to integrate into a society.
And that's not, sorry to interrupt, but that's not diversity though. Just because you were born in Bangladesh, you moved to England, and you eat Cornish pasties and you drink tea and you play for the fucking English cricket team. It's not diversity. It's conforming to the dominant culture. Assimilation is not diversity. It's the opposite of diversity.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's was my point about them. These are, sure, you're talking about, a Pakistani guy who played for the English team. Well, he wasn't wearing a Pakistani flag, and he didn't run around Lords with a Pakistani flag. He celebrated as an Englishman, and that's the whole point. He considers himself an Englishman. Those guys aren't, for the most part. In fact, I haven't seen any of the English team doing this. They aren't coming out and going, I'm something else. They're proud to be from England, and they, as you say, they've assimilated into the culture, and they've adopted that culture. Be it because they were either born there, many of them, or because it's heritage based. It's not actually that they were necessarily born out of the country, or those who were born out of the country have completely assimilated into that. And the other point I might add is that you can these days live in other countries and completely adopt the sort of attitudes, lifestyles, and approach to the world of someone in another country. You could argue, if you look at political affiliations, for example, you and I would fit in quite well in certain parts of the Republican Party in the United States. We could go to a barbecue at Rand Paul's house and we'd be just fine. So him and I would have an argument about interventionism, but other than that, there'd be a lot of common ground there. I just this whole diversity nonsense is so destructive when it's taken on its own to mean something from a perspective of skin color or religion on its own, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, it is quite lazy, in my opinion. And I mean, I am of the view that immigrants shouldn't really assimilate, because Thaddeus Russell, who's a historian that I respect, who's a social, well, he used to be a socialist, now he's just a typical leftist. He makes the point that oppressed minorities create the culture of the future, essentially. So Martin Luther King was funded and aided by black drug barons. So the drug barons sold drugs, which was illegal, sold them to white people, which was even more illegal. But most importantly, when they used that money to buy, well, basically to hire bodyguards with guns for Martin Luther King, so he doesn't get killed by the FBI. So it's like quite a radical thing to be black, rich, drug dealer, and you pay for the bodyguards of Martin Luther King so he doesn't get killed by the state. Now, that is a story that I absolutely adore as an anarchist, as someone who's slightly radical in that way. As soon as the civil rights came in and black people assimilated to the culture, Thaddeus argues that something is left behind that you won't find through assimilation. And now that is something for African Americans to decide for themselves. Is leaving what they left behind worth the cost of assimilation? That's the question up in the air. But anyway, let's talk about America just quickly. Trump's go back home tweet about AOC and that other Omar woman. What do you think about that? I mean, okay, he's focusing on their radicalism and making them seem like they're not really American. I think it's a sort of a case of you're not really American because all you do is come here and moan and talk shit about America. That's the 4D chess I see, but it's factually wrong, which is fine in terms of persuasion. But fundamentally, do you see a greater plan with a tweet like that?
So I'm not sure if there's a greater plan. I'm reticent to give credit to him for playing 4D chess because I don't think he's often playing 4D chess. I just think he's saying what's on his mind. Obviously, I think there's two ways to look at this. There's a short term and a sort of medium to long term. The short term is that it was an incredibly stupid tweet. At minimum, he should have thrown in Ilhan Omar's name there. and he might have had a little bit more justification. She is, I don't know by far, but at the moment she's the worst of the bunch. She really is radical. Is not even the correct word. She's anti-American. She's anti-Semitic. She really is a bad person. And she actually was saved by the Americans from Somalia. She would probably be dead right now if it weren't for the Americans. And she has apparently no appreciation for that whatsoever. But I think it was a very poor tweet in the short term, and I tell you why. From just a strategic perspective, the Democrats were ripping each other apart. So what was happening is you had this sort of young caucus, what are called the Justice Democrats, which is AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and now this Presley, I forget, Ayana, I think. I could be getting that wrong, who's now been included in that. And you have this young sort of group. And basically, in the last week, they had called Nancy Pelosi racist. So, I mean, just to put this in context, for those of you who don't know Nancy's background, Nancy Pelosi is a San Francisco Democrat. She's as progressive as they come. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, she was regarded as pretty much the AOC of the Congress in terms of how progressive she was and how far left she was. Obviously, back then, it was nowhere near where AOC is now in terms of advocating open sort of socialism or communism. But that was Nancy Pelosi. There's no way in hell Nancy Pelosi is a racist. She's many things, but not that. And what was hilarious is you have Donald Trump coming out and defending Nancy Pelosi and saying she's not a racist. And of course, everyone goes, you see, that means she's definitely a racist. And so the Democrats were kind of self-imploding. And so for Trump to kind of come in and give them this sort of arguably bigoted and racist tweet that they can all latch onto and unite around and against was silly. That's the short term. The long term is that he's just escalated the profile of all of those young Congress people. And he knows that those young Congress people do not represent the American base. So there was polling recently done. It was an Axios article that you can go find. Something like 22, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez has a 22% approval rating amongst her constituents. Rashida Tlaib, 9%. These people are very, very, very unpopular in their own districts, never mind across the rest of the United States. And so the thing is that he's just raised these women's profiles either purposefully or inadvertently, and they are going to be the faces and the voices you're going to see in the run-up to 2020. And that is the worst thing that could ever happen to the Democrats. So stupid tweet or not a stupid tweet, 4D chess or not 4D chess, that's my view on what will take place.
Yeah, that's actually a good explanation. I didn't see it that way. It will be interesting. I still think he's going to win by a fair margin.
Well, we'll have to see.
I mean, have you seen the Democrats this week? Now they're all all their great grandparents were slave owners. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Beto O'Rourke said so. Kamala Harris said so. First, they went after Cocaine Mitch, basically. This article.
Did you see his answer though?
Hold on. Cocaine Mitch comes out, and they say, "Oh, his great grandparents were slave owners," and they asked him this in a live interview, and he says, "Well, myself and Barack Obama agree on two things. We both." The descendants of slaves, and we don't like reparations. It's like
mic drop.
Yeah, absolute mic drop. And then now Beto O'Rourke's like, oh, white supremacy is ingrained in the system, and I'm the fucking descendant of slave owners. And Kamala Harris was, caught out, and they found out that her whatever ancestors.
Well, her father actually wrote about this. I mean, she's from Jamaica.
Oh, really?
This was one of the arguments about, there was an argument early in the year. I think Donald Trump Jr. had said something to the effect of Kamala Harris isn't an African American. And of course, that was seen to be racist. But she's not an African American because her lineage is Jamaican, which is not considered to be African American because she's not from Africa. Anyway, that was a scandal. 4 weeks ago, and it feels like 4 years. But her father had actually written that he was descended from slave owners, which means that, Kamala Harris is descended from slave owners. Who cares? Like, I'm sure we're all got ancestors in our history that did shit we wouldn't be proud of. So what?
Not mine. Mine fought Nazis and they fought commies.
Yeah, and what did they do in the
a
1600s?
decade.
Where were they when they stormed the Bastille? What, there was at 1700 and something.
Actually, I don't know. I hope they were guillotined for being monarchists, though. I hope they were on that side of the fence rather than this fucking liberal shit storming the Bastille. The French Revolution was the biggest mistake in world history by far.
Yes, I actually happen to agree with you to a large extent. I'm trying to get a guest on the show who thinks that as well. A guy called Gray Connolly in Australia. Very, very good analyst on these types of things, and also a monarchist, and very much believes in all of this. Very much believes in all of this. This sort of stuff. I think you'll like him a lot. If I can get him to, he's a bit of a recluse.
Oh, right. No, I mean, it was July the 14th, yesterday. I can't remember. Bastille Day. Basically, they killed off a dynasty that lasted 1,000 years in the name of reason. And in the name of reason, they killed hundreds of thousands of people in the name of reason. That was the revolutionaries for you.
To celebrate Bastille Day, Nicolas Sarkozy not Nicolas Sarkozy, I'm thinking of the wrong president now. Emmanuel Macron had a parade with tanks rolling down the Champs-Elysees. And
horrifying militarism, fascism at dawn.
Well, no one said anything about those tanks.
Hold on, sorry, it's not Donald Trump. It's the French president.
Exactly.
He's allowed to do that. Trump does that, it's fascism. If the French do it, the tanks only go in reverse anyway. So,
you know what will be interesting? Whenever they finally get Trump out of office, it'll be the only period in history where a fascist ruled, a white nationalist fascist ruled over a country, and the death rates decreased, the number of hate crimes decreased, everything bad decreased.
Babies decreased. Yeah. And he gave an award to Jack Johnson, which was the world heavyweight champion. He was a serious badass. I heard a podcast series about Jack Johnson. He was caught speeding on a highway in the South. He was born in the South. He was a black guy. And the policeman stopped him and said, "You're speeding. That's a $50 fine." So he hands the guy $100. He says, "No, sir, it's $50." He said, "Oh, no, I'm going to drive back a bit later at the same speed, so I might as well just pay now." He married a white woman. Or he had white girlfriends. He took them across state lines, and that was deemed kidnapping back in those days.
Illegal, highly illegal.
Even if you were like dating or having a relationship, and Jack Johnson didn't give a fuck about anything. Great guy, and Donald Trump gave him a national.
It was a posthumous award,
Posthumous award, yeah. Barack Obama didn't fucking do that. The most progressive president ever didn't give the world's greatest boxer a posthumous award. What legacy do you think Obama has?
Left at the moment, very little.
Yeah, other than Obamacare,
he's got a Nobel Prize for nothing.
Yeah, the Iran deal's dead in the water. All his dovish thing around foreign policy. Has the drone strikes continued in Yemen and other places? I'm not too sure. I haven't heard a story about that in a long time. Maybe it's ended in some way.
I'm not sure it has. I'm not sure it has, and I wish we had proper journalism these days to freak out about that or tell us about that and do a bit more reporting on that instead of telling us, about Ivanka not talking to some leaders at the G20. I would find it difficult to believe that they've stopped that completely. I would think that they've probably scaled back a bit. I mean, Donald Trump is more non-interventionist, more isolationist than certainly Obama seemed to be, and he's definitely less so than any Republican president before him in recent memory. It's interesting. I would be interested to know that. That's the kind of reporting you would expect from the Washington Post or the New York Times, but they are clearly too busy reminding us of absolute rubbish. I mean, did you see there was an article the other day written about how the Lion King is basically just a metaphor for white nationalism and Donald Trump? It is the most astonishing piece of fiction you will ever read in your entire life.
So who's the fascist in the Lion King? Is it Simba?
Well, you see, as you can see, they have Pride Rock which is clearly
Ooh,
it's
I've
it's
tried that.
power. It's power over the other animals. The herbivores are the lower level people, and the
Oh,
hyenas.
the working class,
Yeah, the
right?
working class, and it's all about them keeping power. And the hyenas are the people of color who've always been subjected to the worst that is on offer, and they have no opportunities. And of course, in the film, they're portrayed as being backwards and not as good as everyone else.
And Simba is an ICE officer because he fights the hyenas, doesn't he? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's
And then I
actually
suppose Timon
it
and
gets better. Scar,
Pumbaa are house niggers because they
no.
side with the powerful. No.
Scar is actually queer. And I'm not joking. They put this in the article. In fact, they put in the article that all of Disney's major villains are queer. And it's just typical of Disney's heterosexual normative environment in most of their films.
Hold on. The last great gay Disney character was the genie from Aladdin. And he wasn't bad or villainous. I mean, Jafar.
I never knew he was
Jafar,
gay on account of the fact that they don't put sex into children's films.
don't they? You haven't deconstructed them enough, Jonathan.
I mean,
I think
even
now,
Beauty and the Beast didn't go there.
well, now that you're a bit older, you should deconstruct these things more.
Oh, sure.
What you call them more analytically, because you more work that way. As a gay Arab with a disability and a fucked up
Yes.
voice, these things are important to me.
Are there any questions we need to get to before we wrap it up?
Not that I know of. People are just asking about why Scar is gay. Why is he gay? Did they make the
He's
argument
not
about why?
gay. He hit on Simba's mom, for God's sake. Go back and watch the movie. He was trying to get rid of Mufasa and take over as the patriarch. He's not, for God's sake. And who cares, even if he were to be? This is the whole point. Who knows? Nobody needs to know. I mean, the other day I saw someone actually say something about Timon and Pumbaa, that they actually gay. They actually asked they asked Seth Rogen, and I'm not sure, I can't remember the other guy who's voicing I think Timon. I think Seth is Pumbaa, I would assume, based on Seth. And it's the guy who's voicing Timon. They asked him in an interview if they thought that Timon and Pumbaa were gay. Because, what's it, a warthog and
Meerkat.
a meerkat? Of course, that's just, what a couple. What is wrong with these people?
Well, I mean, if they were gay, who's the bottom? Because, just anatomically, Timon's tiny, Pumbaa's huge.
This live stream needs to end.
I just want to end on an important point, though. Andy No and Antifa, right?
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, Andy No is a journalist, and he went to Portland to film Antifa, and they basically fucked him up. He's got a brain hemorrhage, and he was on Joe Rogan and all sorts of things, and now he's famous. Now, I'm not saying that was the plan all along, but I think this will benefit him more than not benefit him. And now, if you asked me, 3-4 years ago, I'll say this is disgusting. Antifa needs to be arrested. Andy No needs to be left alone. It's free speech, blah, blah, blah. I'm actually a little bit tired, and I don't think this was done on purpose, but I'm a little bit tired of the victim mentality on our side, for the lack of a better word. Like, I suspect Andy No is more on our side than others, other sides. And part of me just wants to say, listen, fucker, just hire the biggest, baddest Russian that you can get as bodyguards. Go film Antifa, and if they fuck you up, you just punch back twice as hard. Like, why is this an issue now where you get beaten up, you go to hospital, and now you sort of e-begging, if I'm being really honest, like, here's my Patreon, like every second fucking tweet is my Patreon, and help me pay for this, and help me pay for a legal fund and all the shit. Why are you using state force to fight off bullies? Like, it's a bit, I don't know. Am I being a bit too critical here?
I think you might be. I think, I think there's a reasonable expectation that you'll go to some sort of demonstration or protest when you've been covering the demonstrations and protests, for 3 or 4 years, as he has. So the argument that he's not a journalist is very spurious. I think there's an expectation that you'll go there and you might get taunted and you might get shouted at and all the rest of that. And you might get caught up in something that happens, like Antifa throws milkshakes, for example. But I think once he gets assaulted, I think that does make him a victim. I think that's a reasonable thing to claim that you're a victim of, proper physical assault. I thought that, on that day, he actually had a milkshake thrown at him before he was assaulted. And he took a photo of his bag with some sort of milkshake on it. Now, it is damage to property and all of that kind of stuff. But I sort of buy your argument for that. Okay, cool. You went to a place where there are people who throw milkshakes as a form of protest, violent protest. It's kind of expected that that's probably going to get on you. Like, that's probably going to happen. Is it right? No, but it's sort of part of the deal. I think I would, I draw the distinction in that he did actually get physically assaulted, and I don't at all think he was asking for it. I don't think he said, all right, if I can get this to happen, it'll be of great benefit to me. I hear what you're saying in that it has in some ways been of great benefit to him. I think he gained 100,000 Twitter followers since it happened. There's a whole legal fund that's been set up. There's also a whole legal sort of program that's been set up to try and address these sort of groups. There's actually a lawyer, quite interesting lady, Harmeet Dillon, who's taking this all on. I think it's a fine line in terms of the criticism you're making when it's more of a, oh, woe is me, and becoming the sort of victim if you aren't actually a victim of anything. On that point, though, did you see Antifa, one of their members died yesterday. He tried to petrol bomb an ICE detention center. He had a rifle and he had a whole bunch of Molotov cocktails, and he was throwing them at an ICE detention center, and they shot and killed him. And Antifa, of course, have come out in complete support of him. There's multiple tweets from multiple Antifa accounts sort of saying, well done, comrade, and, rest in peace and glory and all the rest of that stuff. So I do think they're a domestic terrorist group. I think they now definitely fit that moniker.
Sure. But I don't want to make sure. I'm not blaming Andy No for what happened to him. I'm not saying he isn't a victim. I'm not saying he was an assaulter. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm just saying that without sounding like blaming the victim here, Antifa are violent. Their modus operandi is violence. Andy No knows that, and because he's been, reporting on him for a number of years, this sort of thing was bound to happen sooner or later. He was known to them. They had his mugshot or they had his photo. And it just seems to me like it's always like a huge surprise when violent people are violent, and it shouldn't be anymore. And I'm not saying he's looking for it, but I'm just saying there's a part of me that feels like,
no, it's fine. I get what you're saying. It's like walk through a dangerous neighborhood at night, carrying your iPhone in your hand, wearing an expensive jacket, and when someone jumps out of an alley and sort of mugs you, don't be surprised, right? There are obvious risks in life, and we all make certain decisions to avoid those risks. And so I suppose you pointed to the fact that you're going to an Antifa rally. They don't like you. They've told you they don't like you. They're violent. There's a chance that something like this is going to happen. And I suppose that it needs to be a risk. I think you need to balance that with, okay, but he's a journalist who covers these things. So what's he meant to do then? Not cover them anymore, which is exactly what they want to happen.
Hire big black dudes or Russians or
if you do look at the attack on him, it was very well coordinated. It was planned, and there were multiple guys involved from multiple angles. And I'm not sure that. My understanding is he had some not military, but sort of self-defense training he had done before. He realized that he was at some sort of risk, and he'd actually gone and sort of tried to learn some sort of self-defense. I don't think even had he had bodyguards, he would have been able to completely avoid what happened, because he was attacked from essentially four sides.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just hope it doesn't become something that is more prevalent in terms of being surprised that it happens, really. In that regard. So I think, hour and a half, I think we're quite good. There's no more questions on the live stream. Oh, for those who are listening, if you're still listening, we're on a live stream tonight. That's why we sound a bit funny. And this is something that we've spoken about, Jonathan, but I'm thinking doing more live streams with guests from all over the world, live, of course, on YouTube. I think it's a lot easier for both of us. We're going to kit out our offices suitably for that. If that's something that you think might be beneficial to us, let us know. The studio is still there. We still use it if it's if we can, but it's actually getting a lot harder to get people in studio for a period of time at this stage. So we want to use YouTube and the power of the internet really like to reach anywhere in the world, and we can do that live, and you can join in and you can ask questions while we go. And I think maybe it become a bit more interactive and a bit more interesting for the listeners and the viewers.
Yeah, just one question. Sorry, to clarify, ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So it's basically their immigration police in the US. Yeah, nothing much further from me. Please, if you like the show, renegadereport.co.za /donate. Some new shirts coming soon. We've got one design already. We're working on a couple of others. So if you liked the last bunch, they did sell quite well. So hopefully, there's still a couple left, Ramon.
There are a couple left. I haven't checked. They are online. So if you go to our website, it will say how many are left in what sizes.
Okay, great. Still a few left if you want to get from the last batch, and we'll be making a new batch quite soon. As always, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and everywhere else. Ramon at Roman Kavanagh, myself at Jonathan_Witt. As always, thank you for listening and for your support. We'll chat to you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.